Hey guys, thank you for all your support in recent months. As my channel has grown, the number of messages I get has become a bit overwhelming at times. However, certain questions seem to keep popping up, so I thought I'd address some of them in this video. No doubt this video will get you thinking about more questions, so keep the conversation going in the comments and there may be another FAQ video in the future. Why have I not been censored? A frequent comment I see is that people are surprised my videos have not been blocked or censored in some way. To be honest, YouTube seem to have been fine about my channel and have not been the source of censorship I have faced. This is probably because I am fully aware of their COVID-19 policies and carefully construct my videos so they don't cause any problems in this regard. If I am unsure about one of my videos, then I declare potentially sensitive material to YouTube prior to publication. And please check out these guidelines if you are unsure why I don't mention some topics. Many of you have also become very aware of how to read between the lines when I fly as close to the sun as I can. As you know, sometimes I'll let you know that there are certain things I can't talk about on most social media platforms, but some of those topics are covered in our newly released edition of Virus Mania, so please consider getting a copy if you want more information on this material. I'm currently recording the audiobook and this should be available in a month or two. I also have channels on Odyssey, Library and Brand YouTube, but at the moment I'm reaching the most people through YouTube, so want to keep up this channel if I can. Please consider subscribing to my other channels though, so we don't lose contact. Facebook did do a ridiculous fact-checking warning on one of my PCR videos last year to limit people sharing it. I rebutted their article here, but I'm not sure anybody who's conscious would believe anything coming from these so-called fact-checking sites. One wonders if they are now going to fact-check the UK's chief scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance, for making the following comments a few weeks ago.
Lateral flow tests to PCR, you'll get more positives with PCR because PCR is very, very sensitive. It can pick up very low levels of virus, which may not even be infectious. It may just be low levels there.
So now it's okay for him to say a positive PCR doesn't mean you're infectious. Rules for thee, but not for me. To be frank, the most censorship I have faced has come from within New Zealand. Up until last year, I was a TV presenter on one of the major networks, but that came to an abrupt end when I stated I wouldn't get a COVID-19 vaccine in one of my YouTube videos. And no, I'm still definitely not getting the vaccine. As you know, despite the promoted diversity and inclusivity themes in the current epoch, it is completely the opposite in reality. If you question something about COVID-19 or the vaccines, then they don't even want you included in the conversation at all. But I can tell you from my heart, this sort of cancel culture doesn't faze me. In fact, it shows me the path and keeps me connected to my work. Has SARS-CoV-2 been isolated? In short, no, not by the rigorous definition. Unfortunately, in the modern era, isolation does not mean the purported virus particles have been fully separated and purified. Many people send me links to papers claiming to have isolated SARS-CoV-2, most of which I have already read. In fact, our Virus Mania team have contacted many of these authors to clarify what they actually did. As I've shown previously on direct questioning, none of the authors of these so-called isolation papers claimed that they had a purified sample. Even Michael Law from the Robert Koch Institute wrote in an email that we received on September 4, 2020, "I'm not aware of a paper which purified isolated SARS-CoV-2. Now this is problematic when you're trying to interpret the electron micrographs. A study published in the journal Viruses in May 2020 made the following comment. Nowadays, it is an almost impossible mission to separate EVs, extracellular vesicles, in viruses by means of canonical vesicle isolation methods such as differential ultracentrifugation because they are frequently copalated due to their similar dimension. In other words, the centrifuged sample ends up with various particles of similar size. So how does anyone really know what they are looking at? I've also been asked about GenBank. GenBank is a public database website that lists the purported genetic sequences for hundreds of thousands of organisms, and they have a reference genome sequence for SARS-CoV-2. The problem with this is that if nobody had a purified virus, how did they get the genetic sequence? Well, these new viral sequences are created by PCR. They take artificial and hypothetical primers based on existing genetic sequences available in GenBank and mix them with a sample from a patient. That is, with tens of billions of different RNA and DNA molecules. If the primer is attached to a sequence in the sample, they conclude that it must be from the new and previously unknown SARS-CoV-2. What would Carrie Mullis have said about these fishing trips for bits of genetic material? I'm pretty sure, like our Virus Mania team, he would not have accepted it as the claimed proof. We cannot draw definitive conclusions from this methodology with regards to the provenance of the genetic material. Furthermore, the mere existence of genetic material does not establish pathogenicity either, i.e., genetic snippets may be present, but this doesn't cause disease or mean you are infectious. And don't forget that there is over €225,000 up for grabs for anyone that can prove the actual isolation of SARS-CoV-2 and its genetic substance. Last time I checked, there were no takers. What about lateral flow tests? Before I get into so-called COVID-19 lateral flow tests, I would like to point out that some lateral flow tests are well established for widespread clinical use, such as home pregnancy kits. As I've discussed in my video behind the PCR curtain, if an indirect test is properly developed, it can be very reliable, and a pregnancy test is one such example. In a nutshell, a lateral flow test or device is where a liquid sample is drawn across a series of filters by capillary flow and reacts with particular compounds in the test strip to create a signal, such as a coloured line indicating a positive test. In the case of COVID, it is claimed that the device reacts to specific SARS-CoV-2 viral proteins that may be present in the sample. The sample can be collected from a nasal swab or a saliva sample. So how did lateral flow tests come about for COVID-19? Let's take a look at a paper that came out last month claiming that the lateral flow test has a viral antigen detection sensitivity of 78.8% and a specificity of 99.7%. Not perfect, but seemingly not bad for an on-the-spot test that you can get a result within 15 minutes. Wait a minute though, how were these figures actually obtained? They used comparison with the gold standard, which was RT-PCR results. In my Who Checks the Fact Checkers video last year, I explained how you cannot use a single indirect test to validate itself in a clinical setting and then declare that is the gold standard. In my recent videos, I again point out that the diagnostic specificity of PCR for the condition COVID-19 has simply never been established. Hence, PCR is no gold standard at all. At least the author admits it is important to note that there are some potential issues with considering RT-PCR as the gold standard test for COVID-19. However, the reasons then given are mostly speculation rather than demonstrating an understanding of the difference between the analytical specificity of the test and the diagnostic specificity for the condition. I cannot put it any more clearly that the PCR tests were not established for accuracy in clinical use, so therefore basing COVID lateral flow tests on PCR results is also groundless. One final note on this paper, there is also a rather clear message in the introduction. It reports new medical research that has yet to be evaluated and so should not be used to guide clinical practice. Okay, but have the authorities made any announcements about the use of lateral flow tests?
Lateral flow tests are good at picking up people with high viral load who are most infectious. They will pick up if you use them in situations where you otherwise wouldn't pick up anybody.
There we go. Looks like the science has been settled once again via a press conference. You may have noticed Patrick Vallance mentioning viral load there as well. Viral load is a misused term and does not mean what most people seem to think it is. We discussed this in Virus Mania, and I'd also like to cover this in a future video. Do I know about the Great Reset, etc.? Yes, I am well aware of the grand plans that various groups have for the planet. Most of them are not particularly secret as they openly publish their documents. Even the home pages of these groups are enough to send chills down your spine. I'm not sure if all the relationships between pandemic responses in some of these groups even need to be fully elicited. Many of us can see that it doesn't look healthy and is aimed at centralising power into the hands of a few elites who are apparently going to save us from ourselves. COVID-19 is certainly being used to dovetail in certain agendas, and whether this is by design or chance opportunity, either way, it's not good. This is one of the reasons I first spoke out about COVID-19 in 2020. I didn't like the way it was being used to suppress civil rights and autonomy. In any case, there are others who do a great job of elucidating what these various organisations are up to, and my skill set is better deployed in dealing with medical and scientific material rather than the socio-political and economic themes. So even if I'm aware of these things, I'll continue to focus on medical science and keep working to help you become more empowered with regards to your health. People like James Corbett and Dave Cullen dedicate a lot of their energy into investigating the political and sociological issues, while George Gammon covers what is happening with the financial system reset and ways to protect yourself from the coming changes. These guys are all worth following if you want more information in those areas. What about ivermectin? Okay, so this appears to be a hot topic for many people, and I've had some very energetic messages asking why I'm not promoting or talking about ivermectin. Ivermectin has been in animal and human use since the 1980s and has become a very important parasitic agent. It has been used extensively against parasitic worm infections and mite infections such as scabies. With regards to COVID-19, ivermectin seems to have become a political football. Some practitioners advise the use of ivermectin for both prophylaxis and treatment of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Merck, the drug's producer, released a statement in early February stating they do not believe that the data available support the safety and efficacy of ivermectin beyond the doses and populations indicated in the regulatory agency approved prescribing information. The US National Institutes of Health is sitting on the fence and has stated there are insufficient data for the COVID-19 treatment guidelines panel to recommend either for or against the use of ivermectin for the treatment of COVID-19. So what are my thoughts on this? When people ask me this question, I usually reply that the answer is in my video, What is a COVID-19 case? When we are talking about the syndrome of COVID-19, there are no specific clinical criteria. The case definition, according to the WHO, continues to be a positive nucleic acid amplification test, i.e. PCR, or an antigen rapid detection test such as a lateral flow test. So when we talk about treatments, what are we actually treating? Are we treating a test result? There needs to be some connection to the person. Does the so-called COVID-19 case look like this? Or do they look like this? If you get into a discussion about specific treatments for COVID-19, then you have to accept the premise that the PCR and antigen tests are accurate for diagnosing the specific condition. And that's the problem. This has never been established. I'm not saying that certain treatments wouldn't work for some patients, but this would need to be on a case-by-case basis, rather than basing all treatments on an indirect test result that has not been validated for clinical use. Bring it back to the basic science first so we're all talking about the same thing. Only at that point can we talk about which treatment may be indicated for a particular patient. So that wraps up my first ever COVID-19 FAQs, which I hope has been useful. As many of you know, my belief is that you need to keep yourself in optimal condition through diet, exercise, sleep, managing stress and having meaningful social connections. You can check out some of my other videos covering immune system health. Please keep doing your own research to empower your knowledge and health, and let me know in the comments section any other topics you would like covered. To help sustain my channel in this time of censorship, please support my work on Subscribestar. Link is in the description.